Why would anyone buy a worthless piece of land? Investors might take a risk on seemingly worthless land if they hope that one day it might become valuable. But wise investors aren't likely to sink their money into land that is inaccessible to them. Even the most productive land is worth nothing if the owner is prevented from doing anything with it. That's why Jeremiah's purchase of his cousin's field makes no sense. Jeremiah was in prison for prophesying that the kingdom of Judah would be conquered by the Babylonians and the people taken into exile. That prophecy was coming to pass at the very moment Jeremiah received word from the Lord that his cousin would ask him to buy his land. And yet, even with no assurance that he would ever see a return on his investment, Jeremiah not only agreed to the transaction, but made sure it was witnessed and legally recorded. As faithful as Jeremiah was to the God of Israel, he had his doubts. In trying to make sense of the transaction, he cried out in prayer, "You brought your people Israel out of the land of Egypt with signs and wonders, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, and with great terror. You gave them this land, which you swore to their fathers to give them, a land flowing with milk and honey. They came in and possessed it, but they did not obey your voice, nor walk in your Torah. They have done nothing of all you commanded them to do. Therefore, you caused all this evil to fall on them. Look, the siege ramps have just come up to the city to take it. This city has been handed over to the Chaldeans fighting against it, because of the sword, the famine, and the pestilence. What you have spoken has happened. Here it is, you see it. Yet you said to me, my Lord Adonai, buy for yourself the field for money, and call in witnesses, even as the city is handed over to the Chaldeans." Jeremiah's plea gives God opportunity to explain that this improbable real estate transaction is a prophetic sign of his long-term vision for and promise to Israel. "Now therefore, thus says Adonai, the God of Israel, concerning this city, about which you say it is handed over to the king of Babylon by the sword, famine, and pestilence. See, I will gather them out of all the countries where I have driven them in my anger, my fury, and great wrath, and I will bring them back to this place and cause them to dwell securely. They will be my people, and I will be their God. I will give them one heart and one way, so they may fear me forever, for their good and for their children after them. I will make an everlasting covenant with them. I will never turn away from doing good for them. I will put my fear in their hearts, so that they will not depart from me. Yes, I will delight in doing good for them, and with all my heart and all my soul I will in truth plant them in this land." This is the only time God promises to do something with all his heart and soul. So we should pay attention to that promise. We can confidently say that his promise extends directly to the Jewish people of Judah and their descendants. And it looks like an unconditional promise connected to that same new covenant heart change we Christians profess. So then, it seems that God's promise to restore the Jewish people of Israel to their land does have a connection to all of us from the nations. Let's consider what the Torah connection of this promise might be. We find that in God's instructions about the Yovel, or Jubilee. You are to count off 7 Sabbaths of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the time is 7 Sabbaths of years, 49 years. Then, on the 10th day of the 7th month, on Yom Kippur, you are to sound a shofar blast. You are to sound the shofar all throughout your land. You are to make the 50th year holy and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It is to be a jubilee to you, when each of you is to return to his own property, and each of you is to return to his family. That 50th year will be your jubilee. You are not to sow or reap that which grows by itself, or gather from the untended vines. Since it is a jubilee, it is to be holy to you. You will eat from its increase out of the field. In this year of jubilee, each of you will return to his property. This is what we are all waiting for in the Messianic kingdom. It's the restoration of all things according to God's righteous vision. Both the Christians and Jews are looking forward with great hope to this blessed time, but with different emphases. Christians are expecting the return of Jesus, but usually aren't familiar with what happens after that. Jews expect Messiah's coming to coincide with the restoration of all Israel to the promised land. That's a necessary part of the final redemption of Israel and the nations. But sadly, these two perspectives have been a cause of division between these two halves of God's covenant people. Right now, all we can see with any clarity is that the Jewish people of Israel are the heirs to these promises. That's why we should be unwavering in our prayers for the peace of Jerusalem and our support for the Jewish people. If they don't receive all of their inheritance, then what hope do we from the nations have? And what exactly is our inheritance? Somehow we are joined with Israel, and somehow all the tribes will be reconstituted. So maybe some of us will live alongside our Jewish kin in the blessed land. Yet there are still nations in the kingdom. So what is their hope? Paul says that God made every nation of men to live on the face of the earth, having set appointed times and the boundaries of their territory. That means nations are God's idea, even though their origin at the Tower of Babel didn't happen under the best of circumstances. If he has created the nations and set their boundaries, then the Jubilee of release and restoration must apply to them as well. So maybe the restoration of all things in Messiah means indigenous peoples will receive their land back, and all the nations will be restored to their rightful places. That's my hope. Since the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, then he has the authority to place people and nations wherever he desires. One day, we will cease striving for land and resources and power, and live in cooperation with one another and with our Creator. That's the promise of the Messianic age. What we must keep in mind, though, is that Israel comes first. When Israel is restored, the nations will be restored. The restoration of our Jewish brethren is an operation of God's grace, just as much as salvation in Christ is an operation of God's grace. God gets the glory in both, because by doing so, he overcomes our ignorance, stubbornness, and disobedience. The question is, when Messiah returns, will he find us cooperating with this process or resisting it?